It was dead. At least that was what every other creature believed. In the warm, still waters of the ocean, a tiny body drifted, almost invisible. No teeth, no bones, no strength, no voice. If anyone saw it, they would think only one simple thing: fragile. And then it began to do something no one thought was possible. It reversed its own time, not escaping, not being reborn in any familiar way, but going back, returning, turning itself into a younger version, as if age had never existed, as if death were just a door that could be stepped backward through. No one commanded it, no one taught it how, yet it could do it, again and again, an endless loop. People call it the immortal jellyfish. And in the silence of the ocean, a truth began to reveal itself, slowly but inevitably, that the weakest thing is sometimes the one that cannot be destroyed. But the story does not end there, because deeper still, where no light can reach, there are creatures even more underestimated than it. Creatures with no names, no clear shapes, forgotten and ignored. They are so small that if placed on your fingertip, you would not even feel their existence. And those very creatures have survived things that once brought the world to collapse. Freezing temperatures, cosmic radiation, crushing pressure, even the emptiness of space without air. They do not run, they do not fight, they do not resist. They simply wait. Their bodies shrink, all activity stops, as if they were dead, but they are not. They are only paused like a breath held in the vastness. And when conditions return, they wake up, unharmed, without memories of fear, without any trace of the death that just passed. Those creatures are called tardigrades, and if someone looks at them, they will not see a warrior, not a survivor, just something soft, slow, almost ridiculous. Yet they may be the last living beings when everything else disappears. The world has never been fair in the way it judges strength, and that is a mistake repeated again and again. In the deep forest, where light filters through layers of leaves, there are tall, sturdy trees standing like pillars of life. People look at them and think, this is strength. But beneath the ground, there is another story. A fragile, nearly invisible network spreads everywhere. Tiny, delicate fungal threads weaving between roots, connecting each organism together. No sound, no impressive form, yet that network keeps the entire forest alive. Old trees pass nutrients to young ones, sick trees send warning signals. Beings that seem still and separate are in constant conversation, sharing, supporting, and sometimes sacrificing. People call it the Wood Wide Web, a name that sounds modern, but it is a system older than any civilization. And there, another truth quietly emerges, that strength does not always come from what is biggest, but from what is most connected. But if you think only plants and microorganisms hide such secrets, that is another mistake. Because even in the world of creatures that move, that have eyes and brains, there are stories that leave humans in silence. In the vast savanna, where the wind moves through dry grasslands, a herd of elephants stops. Not because of danger, not because of hunger, but because of a skeleton, an individual that died long ago. They approach slowly, without urgency, their long trunks touching each bone, as if recalling something that cannot be named. No one taught them to do that. There is no ritual, no rule. Yet they stay in silence, and then they leave, carrying something humans once believed belonged only to them: grief. And in that moment, a boundary fades, the boundary between humans and the rest of life. We once believed we were special, that intelligence, emotion, consciousness belonged only to us. But each story like this takes a piece of that belief away, not to diminish humanity, but to remind us we have never stood at the top. We are simply part of something larger, a network without a center, without a main character, without an audience, only life continuing everywhere, even now, even within you. Because if you look deeper, you will realize something. You are not a single body. You are trillions of cells working together, millions of microorganisms living with you, electrical signals dancing in the darkness of your brain. You are an ecosystem, a small world inside a larger one. And just like that jellyfish, like the tardigrade, like the forest, like the herd of elephants, you are part of that story, a story with no clear beginning and no end. Only one thing is certain: life will continue, no matter how. It did not die, it was torn into pieces. In the cold water, a body was split apart, severed, broken into many fragments. No longer a shape, no longer whole, nothing left that resembled a living individual. Any other creature would have ended there. But not this one. Each fragment began to move. No panic, no escape, no resistance. They simply began again. One small piece grew new structures, another rebuilt a nervous system, and then slowly, almost imperceptibly, each fragment became a complete body. Not recovery, but multiplication. Creatures like this exist in the world. Flatworms, starfish, forms of life humans once considered simple, primitive, insignificant. Yet they hold an ability humans can only dream of to regenerate their entire selves. And there a truth begins to emerge, sharp as a blade. What is completely destroyed is not necessarily gone. In the darkness of the ocean, a starfish quietly moves across the sand. It is slow, it has no brain in the way humans understand, no eyes like predators, no speed, no strategy, an easy target. And then a predator strikes. A bite, one arm is torn away. Pain, perhaps, but there is no scream, no violent reaction, only a subtle movement as the remaining body continues forward, as if it had never lost a part of itself. And the lost piece does not die, it begins to grow. From a fragment, a new body forms, a new creature from an injury. If a human loses part of their body, it is loss. But for it, it is opportunity. And in other waters, an even stranger story unfolds. A soft, nearly invisible organism drifts with the current. It has no bones, no fixed form, nothing that seems important. A creature you would forget the moment you saw it. But inside it lies a secret science is still trying to understand. If you cut it into two, it is not one part that lives and one that dies, but two complete organisms. Cut it again, 4, then 8, then more. There is no clear limit, no point where it says enough, only repetition, regeneration, division, existence. Creatures like this do not need to fight to survive. They simply cannot be eliminated in the usual way. And in a world where strength is measured by size, speed, or the ability to kill, they are a paradox, something weak, yet almost untouchable. Humans once believed strength was something visible, a large body, an advanced brain, a complex system, but nature does not follow that definition. It plays a different game, one where the rules are not about who is stronger, but who is harder to erase. In a laboratory, under cold lights, scientists look through microscopes. They see cells moving, dividing, restructuring. They record, measure, analyze. But the more they look, the more they realize something that leaves them silent. These organisms do not just heal, they rewrite themselves, not according to a fixed blueprint, but through a flexible logic that seems almost without limits. And in that moment, a question appears, unspoken but shared by all. If life can do this, does an ending truly exist? Somewhere else, there are no microscopes, no laboratories, only the sea, the wind, and drifting creatures in silence. No one observes them, no one records, no one names each moment, yet they continue. They do not need recognition, they do not need to be understood, they simply exist. And that is the plot twist humans rarely accept. The most underestimated creatures hold the greatest secrets, not because they are more intelligent, but because they are not bound by the limits humans impose. They do not need a fixed identity, a permanent form, or a clear ending. They change, they adapt, they continue. If you look at this world slowly, you will begin to see a pattern. What is large can collapse, what is strong can be defeated. But what is flexible, what can change form, change state, even change its very nature, is what lasts the longest. And then the question is no longer about those creatures out there. It turns back to you. If a creature can rebuild its entire body from a fragment, if a body can rewrite itself, if life does not truly need a fixed form to continue, then what truly defines you? Is it this body? Is it memory? Or something deeper that is changing every second without you noticing? In the silence, the answer does not come immediately, but a feeling begins to spread that you are not as fixed as you think, that life is not as fragile as you imagine, and that an ending may simply be a perspective, not the truth, just a way humans look at a process they have never fully understood. And somewhere within that endless flow, life continues. It does not fight the environment, it disappears from it. In the moment when every other organism begins to panic, when temperatures drop to nearly unbearable levels, when water freezes, when life is suffocated by the cold, it does not run, it does not hide, it does not struggle. It shuts itself down. Its body contracts, the water inside its cells nearly vanishes, all biological activity stops. There is no movement, no sign of life. If someone were to look at it, they would say it is dead. But that is a mistake. It is not dead, it is simply waiting. And when the temperature rises, when water returns, when conditions become favorable again, it opens once more. Its body expands, its cells reactivate, and it continues as if nothing had ever happened. Creatures like this exist in the world: insect larvae, microorganisms, tiny forms of life that humans often overlook. Yet they have solved a problem that all larger organisms fail to solve: how to exist when existence itself is no longer possible. In the polar regions, where the wind cuts like a blade and temperatures fall so low that even metal becomes brittle, there are organisms that freeze completely. Not hibernation, not reduced activity, but true freezing. Blood turns to ice, the body hardens, everything stops entirely. If it were a human, that would be the end. But for them, it is just another state. Inside their bodies, special molecules appear, like invisible shields. They prevent ice crystals from destroying cellular structures. They keep everything intact, even when temperatures have passed the limits of life. And when spring arrives, the ice melts, the body softens, life resumes. There is no memory of death, no trace of destruction, only continuation. But cold is not the only challenge. In places where humans cannot even stand for more than a few minutes, life still exists in ways that make ordinary logic meaningless. In acidic lakes, where the pH can corrode metal, where steam carries the scent of sulfur and temperatures are nearly boiling, there are still organisms living. Not barely surviving, but thriving. They do not use sunlight. They do not rely on oxygen like most other life forms. They draw energy from chemicals, from reactions that humans usually only observe in laboratories. They do not adapt to the environment. They belong to it. If you place them in a normal setting, they would die. And that is another quiet but powerful twist. What humans call extreme is normal for another form of life. Deep beneath the ocean, where light has never reached, where pressure is enough to crush anything familiar, strange organisms exist around hydrothermal vents. The water there is not just hot, it boils, carrying metals, minerals, raw energy. An environment where any surface organism would be destroyed instantly. Yet there, life begins. There is no light, no plants, no oxygen as we know it, only darkness and heat. And in that darkness, the first microorganisms may have appeared. Primitive, simple forms of life, but enough to begin a long chain leading to everything that exists today. A truth that is difficult to accept, but impossible to deny. Life does not need comfortable conditions. It only needs an opportunity. Humans often think they are searching for life in places similar to Earth, planets with water, with air, with moderate temperatures. But if these organisms are any indication, they may be looking in the wrong places. Because life does not need to resemble us. It can exist in acid, in ice, under pressure, in darkness, and perhaps in places humans have never even imagined. But the most unsettling part is not those distant environments. It is something closer. The fact that even here on Earth, life has always surpassed every limit humans have ever set. In a landfill, where plastic accumulates over years, where humans believe these materials will last almost forever, something unexpected has happened. Some bacteria have begun to consume plastic. Not quickly, not loudly, no dramatic event marks it. Just small chemical reactions repeating over and over. The plastic breaks down, its structure is dismantled, materials once thought non-degradable begin to disappear. Not because humans solved the problem, but because life adapted to it. And that is when the story turns again. Humans often believe they are in control of the world, but in reality, they are only creating new conditions, and life will always find a way to adapt to those conditions. It does not ask for permission, it does not need instructions, it does not require a clear purpose, it simply continues. If you look at all of this slowly, a pattern begins to emerge. Life is not strong because it cannot be destroyed. It is strong because it never relies on a single way to exist. When one path is blocked, it creates another. When one form no longer fits, it changes. When an environment becomes hostile, it turns that environment into home. And then a question appears, quiet but profound. If life can adapt to any condition, where is the true limit? Is it in the environment or in the way we understand it? In the silence of the most extreme places, in the cold, the heat, the darkness, the pressure, life still exists. Not as a miracle, but as a rule. A simple rule. As long as even the smallest possibility remains, life will find a way to continue. And perhaps it always does. They do not have a brain in the way humans understand, yet they can build things that humans took centuries to learn. In a dense forest where light is broken into fragments through the canopy, a dark flow is moving. Not water, not soil, but ants. Thousands of individuals moving like a single body. No voice, no leader, no map. And then they stop. In front of them is a gap, an opening, an obstacle that a single individual cannot cross. In the human world, that would be the end point. But for them, it is the beginning. One ant moves forward, it grips the edge, another climbs onto its back, then another, and then a structure begins to form. No plan, no design, no one giving orders, yet each ant knows exactly what to do. They connect, tighten, adjust, restructure according to the weight and the flow moving above them. A living bridge. Not wood, not stone, not steel, just bodies. And when the entire colony has crossed, the bridge disappears. No trace, no remains, no one records it as if it never existed. If humans saw this for the first time, they would call it a miracle. But it is not a miracle. It is intelligence. A form of intelligence that does not exist within an individual, but within a collective. And this is where things begin to feel uncomfortable, because humans are used to thinking that intelligence must have a center, must have a brain, must have consciousness. But these creatures have none of those things, and still they solve problems. Somewhere else, smaller and quieter, another creature is facing a task. A card with shapes on it. One card has 3 shapes, one has 2, one has 1, and one has nothing. If you were human, you would understand immediately, nothing is the least. But this creature is not human. It has a brain so small, it is almost unbelievable. A fragile body, a short life. And then it chooses. Not the card with 1 shape, not 2, not 3, but the empty card. Nothing. A simple decision, yet it contains an abstract concept humans once believed only they could understand. 0. Not instinct, not reflex, but cognition. And once again, the world shifts. The creatures considered small, simple, insignificant, hold abilities humans once believed were theirs alone. But if you think that is the limit, then you have underestimated them again. In another forest, a crow stands still. It does not fly, it does not search for food immediately, it does not act on instinct. It waits. In front of it is a tool, a simple object, a stick. But what it sees is not a stick, it is a solution. It picks it up, adjusts it, bends it, tests it, then uses it to reach food in a place it could not access in the usual way. Not by chance, not by luck, but planning. It does not just react to the present, it thinks about the future. In that moment, another boundary disappears, the boundary between instinct and intelligence. Humans once believed they were special because they could think, plan, create. But each story like this slowly blurs that difference. Not to diminish humans, but to expand the definition of intelligence. Because perhaps intelligence is not something you possess, but something that can appear in many different forms. In a large brain, in a small brain, in a collective without a center, or in a system without clear consciousness. And that is the greatest twist of this chapter. Intelligence does not need you to recognize it in order to exist. In the world of ants, no individual understands the entire system, yet the system functions. In the world of bees, no individual knows mathematics in the way humans do, yet they still calculate. In the world of crows, there are no schools, no complex language like humans, yet they still learn. And if you look deeper, you will realize something that makes you pause. How many parts of your life are happening in the same way? How many decisions you make are not fully conscious? How many thoughts are simply the result of signals you do not control? Perhaps human intelligence is not as different as it seems, only more complex. And if that is true, then you are not the center of intelligence. You are simply one expression of it, one form that life has chosen, just as it chose ants, chose bees, chose crows. In the silence of the forest, no creature declares itself the most intelligent. There are no titles, no rankings, only actions, solutions, ways of existing. And intelligence is not defined by words, but by the ability to adapt, to solve, to continue. And somewhere within that endless flow, intelligence is still emerging in forms that humans have not yet recognized. They do not speak, yet they are communicating constantly. In a quiet forest, where the wind barely brushes past each leaf, where everything seems still, a conversation is taking place. No sound, no visible movement, no signal that humans can hear. And because of that, humans once believed this place was silent. But that is a mistake, a very big mistake. Beneath the ground where light never reaches, a network stretches outward. Not roots, not entirely, but thin fungal threads weaving through the soil, connecting one tree to another, spreading for meters, tens of meters, even farther. No one sees them, no one pays attention to them, yet they are what keep the entire forest alive. A young tree, weak, sitting in the shade without enough light to grow. If it stood alone, it would die, but it does not stand alone. Deep underground, the fungal threads connect it to a larger, stronger tree that has survived many seasons. And then the flow begins. Sugar, water, nutrients moving from the larger tree to the smaller one. No force, no command, just an action that happens. If humans looked at this, they would ask why. Why would one tree share its resources? Why not keep them to become stronger? But that is how humans think. The forest does not work that way. In this network, no individual truly stands apart. A tree is not just a tree, it is part of a system. And that system prioritizes the survival of the whole over any single individual. But that is not the most surprising part, because this network does not only transfer nutrients, it transfers information. One day, an insect begins feeding on the leaves of a tree. Not all trees, just one. But almost immediately, the surrounding trees begin to respond. They strengthen their defenses. They produce chemicals that make their leaves more bitter. They prepare before the attack reaches them. No one tells them. There is no sound, no signal humans can hear, yet the information has been transmitted through the underground network, through fungal threads that no one can see. And there, a quiet but undeniable twist appears. The forest is not a collection of individuals. It is a body, a vast, complex body without a center, without a single brain, without a single heart. Yet it still functions as a unified entity. Humans once believed intelligence required consciousness, but this forest does not have consciousness in the way humans understand, and yet it still makes decisions. But not everything is cooperation. In the damp darkness, another organism is moving in a completely different way. A fungus, not large, not fast, not remarkable, yet inside it is a cold strategy. It enters the body of an ant, not causing immediate pain, not killing it right away. It waits, spreads, takes over, and then begins to control. The ant, still alive, starts to behave differently. It leaves its colony, climbs a plant, grips onto a leaf at a precise height, not by chance, but the perfect position for the fungus to grow. And then the ant stops. It dies. But the story does not end. From its body, a structure emerges. The fungus grows, releases spores, infects others, a cycle repeats. If you look at this, you may see horror, but if you look deeper, you will see another form of intelligence, a form of control, a form of adaptation so precise it becomes unsettling. And once again, the world shifts. There is not only cooperation, not only sharing, but also competition, exploitation, control. The forest is not as peaceful as humans imagine. It is a complex system where many strategies coexist: cooperation and control, sharing and exploitation, living together and living off one another. And at the center of it all are the connections, invisible links. If you pause and think for a moment, you will realize something. The human world is not so different. You are connected too, through language, through signals, through technology, through things you cannot see. You share, you compete, you influence and are influenced. Perhaps you are not as independent as you think. Perhaps you are also part of a larger network. And if that is true, then the question is no longer who you are, but what you are connected to. In the silence of the forest, no creature stands alone. No story exists in isolation. Everything touches, influences, exists together. And somewhere beneath the ground you stand on, conversations are still taking place, uninterrupted, unbroken. It is only that you have never heard them. But that does not mean they do not exist. And perhaps they were never silent at all. It does not cry, but it stays. Across the vast grassland, under the dry, relentless sun, a herd of elephants stops before white bones that have lain there for a long time. There is no scent of life, no movement, only the trace of a body that has disappeared from this world. An old elephant steps forward slowly, as if each step carries a heavy memory. It extends its long trunk to touch the skull, gliding over every curve, every crack, as if searching for something that has been lost. No one gives an order. There is no ritual being taught, yet the entire herd remains, silent longer than necessary. And in that moment, something humans once believed belonged only to them becomes clearer than ever: grief. There are no tears, no words, but there is presence, there is memory. There is a bond that reaches beyond death. And this is where the story begins to challenge the way humans see the world. Because if a creature can remember, can pause, can feel loss, then it is no longer just a creature. It is an individual with experience, with emotion, with an inner world we cannot see. But elephants are not the only case. Beneath the ocean, where light bends into soft blue shadows, sounds travel. Not noise, but structured sequences of signals. Dolphins call to one another, not with random sounds, but with distinct signals. Each individual has a name, a unique sound that others can recognize. When one is separated from the group, those sounds become more frequent, more urgent, like a call, like concern. And when the familiar sound is played back, the individual responds not as a simple reflex, but as recognition, a recognition of itself within the call of another. And there, another boundary fades. Language is no longer exclusive to humans, identity as well. But what makes this even deeper happens before life even begins in the way we usually see it. Inside a small egg, resting beneath warm feathers, a sound emerges, soft, very soft, a call from within. An unborn chick is communicating. It produces rhythmic sounds, and from outside, the mother responds, not randomly, but with adjusted reactions. She rotates the egg, she changes position, she responds to the sound from a being she has never seen, and even the neighboring eggs respond. Individuals that have never met, never existed in the outside world have already begun to interact, a conversation before life officially begins. And there, another quiet twist appears. Connection does not require physical presence, does not require sight, does not require touch, only signals, only response. But if you think emotion and connection stop at these more acceptable examples, nature goes even further. In a laboratory, a mirror is placed in front of a creature. A small mark is placed on its body in a position it cannot see without the mirror. If it looks into the mirror and touches the mark, it means it recognizes itself, not another creature, not an unfamiliar image, but itself. Humans once believed very few animals could do this, but the list keeps growing. Great apes, dolphins, elephants, magpies, and perhaps more. Creatures that can recognize themselves, not in the way humans define it, but in their own way. And in that moment, an unavoidable question arises. If they can recognize themselves, do they have a sense of self? And if so, where does the boundary between us and them truly lie? Humans once stood in a place of certainty, believing they were the center, the peak, where consciousness reached its most complete form. But each story like this begins to shake that position, not through attack, but through truth. That emotion does not need to resemble human emotion to exist. That awareness does not need to resemble human awareness to have value. That life has developed many different ways to experience the world, and none of them are the only way. If you look back slowly, you will begin to see a pattern. Creatures considered lesser often display what humans consider higher, not because they are trying to prove anything, but because they simply are. And that is what makes this story profound. Not because it makes humans smaller, but because it expands the picture. A picture where emotion does not belong to a single species, where connection does not require words, where consciousness can exist in many forms. And within that picture, humans are not removed. They simply no longer stand alone. They are one part, one of many ways life has learned to feel. And somewhere across the grasslands beneath the ocean, within eggs that have yet to hatch, emotion continues to exist. Not loudly, not needing recognition, simply present. And perhaps it has always been there, long before humans found a name for it. You are not a body, at least not in the way you think. If you could see through your skin, through every layer of tissue, every blood vessel, every heartbeat, you would not see a single human. You would see an ecosystem, a crowded, chaotic world that operates with a precision that is almost impossible to believe. Tens of trillions of cells, each living its own life, performing its own function, and then dying to make way for new ones. There is no shared voice, no central command in the way you imagine, yet everything still coordinates. A muscle cell contracts, a neuron sends a signal, an immune cell rushes in to attack. No one gives orders, yet everything happens at the right moment. And this is where the twist begins. You do not control your body in the way you think. You simply experience the result of billions of small decisions that you are not aware of. A thought appears. You believe it is yours, but before you think it, Countless electrical signals have already moved through neural networks, processed, formed. Your consciousness is only the final layer of a long process. And beneath that process is an even more complex system. Inside you, there are not only human cells, there are trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, organisms that do not carry a human identity. Yet they live with you, on you, and inside you. They digest food, they produce vitamins, they influence your immune system, and even your mood. There are days when you feel sad without knowing why, moments when you crave a specific type of food, reactions you believe are yours, but they may be signals from another world within you, a world you have never truly noticed. And that is when the boundary begins to blur. Who are you? Are you these cells, or the collection of all the organisms living inside you, or the stream of consciousness flowing like a thin surface layer? In your brain, around 86 billion neurons are active, each connecting to thousands of others, forming a network more complex than any system humans have ever built. And within that network, tiny electrical impulses jump across gaps, not loud, not visibly bright, yet those impulses create thoughts, create memories, create emotions, create you. If you could see it, you would see a storm of signals, constant, never stopping. Even when you sleep, it continues. Even when you are not thinking, it is still active. And that is a difficult truth to accept. You never truly switch off, you only change states. But something even stranger is that you are not the same person you were yesterday. Cells die, new cells are created, your skin changes, your blood changes, even the structure of your brain changes with every experience. You are constantly rebuilding yourself, not once, but every day, every hour, every moment. And if that is true, then what are you? A fixed entity or a process that is unfolding, a continuous flow with no clear beginning and no fixed end. Humans often search for stability, an identity, a definition, but your body is not stable. It changes, adapts, responds, restructures, and still maintains the feeling that you are one, a single individual, a single consciousness, a single story. But perhaps that is only a necessary illusion, a way for this system to function smoothly. Because if you truly felt everything happening inside you, you would not be able to focus on anything else. You would be overwhelmed by information, by movement, by life unfolding at every level. And that is why you do not see it. Not because it does not exist, but because you do not need to see it. Yet the truth remains. You are not alone in your own body. You are not a separate entity. You are a community, an ecosystem, a collaboration of countless forms of life. And the most surprising part is that all of it works together, not in chaos, not collapsing, but creating a single outcome, an experience, an awareness, a you. And when you realize this, a strange feeling emerges, not fear, not loss of control, but expansion, that you are larger than you think, not because you are stronger, but because you are not just one, you are many. And within that complexity, there is a quiet beauty, a system working endlessly so that you can breathe, think, feel, exist. And perhaps the greatest wonder is not the creatures out there, but the fact that a world like this is living inside you right now, and it has never stopped. It does not need light, yet it still glows. In the dense black ocean, where sunlight has never reached, where everything is swallowed by pressure and darkness, a flicker suddenly appears. Not a reflection, not an accident, but light created from within. A tiny organism, almost invisible, releases a faint blue glow when the water is disturbed. No sound, no warning, just a chemical reaction happening in silence. And then a wave breaks on the surface. The entire sea lights up, like a galaxy pulled down to Earth, as if the ocean itself is breathing out light. People call it bioluminescence, but that name is not enough to describe what is truly happening, because this is not just light, this is language. This is signal. This is life communicating in a way humans do not understand. One organism glows to attract prey, another glows to deceive predators, some glow to find a mate, some to disappear within their own light. There is no single purpose, no fixed way of using it, only one tool used in countless different ways. And that is when the story turns. Humans once believed that light came from the outside, from the sun, from fire, from large sources of energy. But here light is created by the smallest living things, requiring no strength, no technology, only a reaction at the right moment. But the ocean does not only glow, it also sings. Beneath the deep water, where sound travels farther than light, calls echo. Long, slow, deep, a blue whale begins to sing. Its sound is unlike anything humans usually hear. Not speech, not music in any familiar sense. Yet it has structure, rhythm, repetition, and most importantly, it has a listener. That sound can travel thousands of kilometers underwater, crossing distances humans can hardly imagine. And somewhere far away, another being receives the signal and responds. A conversation unfolding in the darkness, unseen, untouched, yet still connected. And each group of whales has its own voice, a form of culture, a form of tradition. Their songs change over time. They are learned, passed on, transformed. There is no writing, no recording, yet they persist. And there, another truth emerges. Culture is not exclusive to humans. But if you think the ocean is only a place of light and sound, then you have missed one of the strangest moments of life. On a specific night, at a precise time, under the full moon, an entire coral reef begins to move. Not fast, not loud, but in unison. Millions of tiny organisms, fixed to rock, unable to move, simultaneously release eggs and sperm into the water, like a storm, but slow, like snow, but alive. The entire ocean becomes a jaryan of new life. No one gives orders, there is no central control, yet everything happens with perfect timing, as if they are following a rhythm humans cannot hear. The rhythm of the moon, the rhythm of the tides, the rhythm of the earth itself. And that is the next twist. The simplest organisms are synchronized with the largest cycles of the universe, without needing to understand, without needing awareness in the human sense, yet still precise. But the ocean holds another secret, one that makes everything feel much smaller than we think. In a single drop of seawater, there can be thousands, even millions of living things, microorganisms, algae, bacteria, viruses, forms of life so small you cannot see them, yet they produce most of the oxygen you are breathing. Not forests, not large trees, but drifting organisms that are almost invisible. They absorb light, convert energy, release oxygen, repeat, endlessly. No one notices them, no one sees them, but if they disappear, everything changes. And that is when everything turns again. The most important things are often the least noticed. The smallest organisms hold the greatest roles. And the ocean is not empty. It is a world full of light within darkness, full of sound within silence, full of life in places that seem like nothing exists. If you stand on the shore and look out, you see a flat blue surface. Calm, simple, but that is only the surface. Beneath it lies a system more complex than any city, more connected than any network, holding more stories than any book. And you have never truly seen it, not because it is hidden, but because you were not designed to see it. But that does not mean it does not exist. And perhaps what matters most is not that you understand everything, but that you realize one thing, that this world is far greater than what you can perceive. And somewhere in the deep darkness, light is still being created, endlessly, without needing to be seen, simply existing. It was once a poison. The thing you are breathing right now once wiped out nearly all life on this planet. Not war, not an asteroid, not fire or ice, but oxygen. Billions of years ago, Earth did not have an atmosphere like it does today. There were no lungs breathing in and out, no organisms depending on this gas to survive. The earliest forms of life existed in a completely different world, without oxygen, without light in the way we understand it. They lived through simple chemical reactions, in an environment that to them was normal. Then something small happened. Extremely simple organisms began using sunlight to produce energy, a new process, a new mechanism, and its byproduct was oxygen. At first, it was nothing significant, just a small amount of invisible gas dissolving in water, unnoticed. But over time, it accumulated, increasing slowly, silently, without warning, without any clear sign of danger, until it was too late. Oxygen began to destroy the cells of the organisms that had existed before. It reacted with molecules, disrupting essential life processes. Those that could not adapt died, in massive numbers, not because they were weak, but because the world had changed and they could not keep up. An extinction event without explosions, without large movements, just an invisible shift in the air. And that is the first twist. The thing that gives you life was once the cause of death for others. Nothing is absolutely good or bad. There is only what fits and what does not. But the story does not end there, because from that destruction something new emerged. Organisms that could use oxygen began to develop, a more powerful, more efficient source of energy, allowing life to become more complex, larger, faster, and eventually leading to everything you see today. You are the result of an extinction, a change that billions of organisms did not survive. And that is what makes the story difficult to accept. Evolution is not a smooth journey. It is a series of events, collapses, and restarts. Throughout Earth's history, there have been at least 5 times when most life was wiped out, not a small fraction, but the majority. At one point, more than 90% of life in the oceans disappeared. Almost everything. Ecosystems that had existed for millions of years vanished in a relatively short time. Volcanoes erupted, toxic gases spread, temperatures shifted, everything combined to create an environment where existing life could not survive. But after each of these events, life did not stop. It changed. Small, unremarkable organisms survived, not because they were stronger, but because they were better suited to the new conditions. And from them, new forms of life emerged. New ecosystems formed. A new world built on the remains of the old. And that is the next twist. Extinction is not the end of life. It is a transition, a way for the system to restructure itself. But you do not have to go that far back in time to see this. There are places on Earth that were once completely different. The Sahara Desert, where you now see sand, sunlight, and dryness, was once green land with grass growing, water flowing, animals living. Even humans once lived there and left marks on stone. But then Earth's orbit shifted, monsoon patterns weakened, rainfall gradually decreased, and the region dried out, not in a day, not in a year, but over thousands of years. So slowly that the organisms living there did not immediately notice the change until there was no longer enough water to survive. And so an ecosystem disappeared, not because it was suddenly destroyed, but because it was gradually replaced. And that is what makes this story thought-provoking. Change does not need to be fast to become irreversible. It only needs to be continuous. If you look at all of this, a pattern emerges. No state is permanent. No environment is fixed. No ecosystem is guaranteed to last forever. Everything is temporary. And what determines survival is not strength, not size, not position in the food chain, but the ability to adapt to change. And then the question returns, not about the past, but about the present. If Earth has changed so many times, if life has been wiped out and reborn again and again, what makes you think the present is stable? Perhaps you are living in a temporary moment, a phase between 2 major changes. And like the organisms before you, you do not realize it. Not because you are not intelligent, but because change is often too slow to perceive. But that does not mean it is not happening. And somewhere in the long flow of time, Earth is still changing. Without stopping, without asking, without waiting, life will continue, not in the same form, not in the same way, but always finding a new path, as it has before, as it always will. It slept for 2,000 years. No breathing, no growth, no change. Buried beneath the soil, through wars, through empires rising and falling, through seasons of rain, years of drought, through generations of humans who came and went. If someone had found it at any point during that time, they would have thought it was just a dead object, something that had lost the ability to live long ago. But they would have been wrong. Because when water touches it, when the temperature is right, when conditions become right, it wakes up. Not revived in the usual sense, but continuing, as if the past 2,000 years were only a brief pause. A seed, a tiny organism that seems insignificant, yet holds a capability humans cannot fully understand, the ability to wait through time. And that is when the story begins to bend in a way unfamiliar to human thinking, because humans measure time by a lifetime, by years, by decades, but nature does not use the same unit. Somewhere else, not far in geography, but very far in perception, there is a forest. Tree trunks stand side by side, leaves gently moving in the wind, looking no different from any other forest. But if you look deeper, you will see that all those trunks are actually one, a single root system stretching underground, continuously creating new trunks, replacing the old ones that have died. There is no clear beginning, no defined end, only continuation. That system may have existed for more than 80,000 years. 80,000 years, from a time when humans did not yet have language as they do now, when ice still covered vast lands, when creatures you only see in books were still alive, and it's still there. not moving, not developing in a way that is easy to see, yet not disappearing. And that is the next twist. Life does not need to change quickly to last a long time. It only needs to not stop. But time is not only preserved in trees or seeds, it also exists in creatures you can see every day without realizing it. Sharks, creatures that humans often associate with danger, predation, modernity. Yet in reality, they have existed for more than 400 million years, before the first trees appeared on land, before many familiar forms of life began to emerge. They were already swimming in the oceans when the world was completely different. And what is remarkable is that they have not changed much. Their bodies, their structures, the way they exist have been sufficient for a very long time. No need for dramatic evolution, no need for constant transformation, only the need to fit. And that is a difficult truth for humans to accept. Progress is not always necessary. Sometimes, what lasts the longest are the things that do not need to change very much. If you look back at all of this, another pattern begins to appear. Time, in the natural world, is not a straight line. It is not a chain of events leading to an endpoint. It is more like a loop, a cycle, a flow where things can pause, extend, repeat without following human speed. A seed can wait for thousands of years. A root system can persist for tens of thousands of years. A species can survive for hundreds of millions of years. And all of this happens alongside your life. A life that lasts a few decades, a span that to you feels like everything, but to nature is only a moment. And that is where things become uncomfortable. Because humans like to believe they are the center of the story, that time revolves around them, that what they experience matters most. But when you place your life next to these timescales, you begin to see something else. You are not the center. You are a small part of a much larger flow, not unimportant, but not unique either. And that is the final twist of this chapter. Your value does not come from how long you exist, but from how you exist within the time you have. Because nature is not in a hurry. It does not need to achieve something within a short span. It can wait, it can try again, it can begin again as many times as needed. But humans cannot. And because of that, each of your moments becomes different, not because it is long, but because it is limited. If a seed can wait for 2,000 years, it does not need to rush to sprout. If a root system can last 80,000 years, it does not need to worry about tomorrow. If a species can survive for hundreds of millions of years, it does not need to fear change. But you do not have that kind of time. And that is not a weakness. That is what makes you special in a different way. You are not designed to exist forever. You are designed to experience, to feel, to realize that your time, though short, is still part of a much larger story. And when you look up, or look down, or look within, you will see that time is not only something that passes, it is something that connects everything, from a sleeping seed to an ancient forest, to a creature swimming in the ocean long before trees existed, to you. All of it is here at the same time within the same flow. And that flow has never stopped. You do not see the world as it truly is. You only see the version your body allows you to see. In a garden full of flowers, where humans see petals in red, yellow, purple, a bee flies by. It does not see what you see. To it, petals are not just colors, they glow in a different way. Patterns appear under ultraviolet light, invisible pathways clearly marking where nectar lies, a map already drawn that you are completely blind to. And that is the first twist. The world does not have a single version. There are countless versions existing in parallel. Each species, with its own set of senses, lives in a different reality. But if you think only light is different, then you are underestimating the diversity of perception. In the darkness, where human eyes are no longer useful, another creature moves, without light, without images. A bat. It emits sound. Waves spread out, hit objects, return as echoes, and from those signals it sees, not with eyes but with sound, distance, shape, movement, all reconstructed in its mind from vibrations in the air. A world created not by light but by echoes, and in that world it flies with precision down to the centimeter, avoiding obstacles, catching prey, existing without seeing in the way humans understand. But there are creatures that go even further. In the burning desert, where sand absorbs heat from the sun, a snake moves. Its eyes do not only see form, it sees heat. Warmer regions glow in its perception. A small mouse hiding in the dark still appears clearly as a point of heat against a cooler background. No need for light, no need for obvious movement, only a difference in temperature, and that is enough. A world where objects are distinguished by heat, not by color, not by shape, but by energy. And once again, the boundary is broken. Vision is not the only way to see. Perception is not a fixed system. But what makes everything more complex is that no species holds the complete picture. Humans see colors, but not ultraviolet. Bees see ultraviolet, but not the world as humans do. Bats see through sound, but do not have images in the familiar sense. Snakes see heat, but do not distinguish colors like you. Each species holds only a part, a slice, a version, and all of those versions do not fully overlap. And that is the deepest twist. There is no absolute reality that you can directly experience, only reality filtered through the senses. But the story does not stop with other creatures. It turns back to you. What you see is not actual light, it is how your brain interprets signals from your eyes. What you hear is not raw sound, it is how your brain converts vibrations into experience. What you feel is not the external world, it is a model your brain constructs so you can understand. You do not live in the world. You live in a version of the world, a version that is edited, simplified, optimized, so you can survive. And that is what makes everything uncertain. Because if you do not see the whole, what guarantees that you are understanding correctly? If a bee looks at a flower and sees a map you cannot see, which version is real? If a bat flies in darkness and sees everything more clearly than you, who has the better perception? The answer is not simple, because each version is valid within its limits. And that is something humans rarely accept. They want a single truth, an objective reality, one correct way of seeing. But nature does not work like that. It allows multiple realities to exist at the same time, not conflicting, not excluding each other, just different. If you pause and think slowly, you will begin to notice something. How many things in your life are only interpretations? How many emotions are simply responses of the nervous system? How many beliefs are built on what you can perceive rather than what truly exists? Perhaps you have never seen the world as it truly is, and that is not a problem, because you do not need to see everything to exist. You only need to see enough. But when you realize that, a different feeling appears. Not doubt, but expansion. That this world is far larger than your experience, that there are layers of reality you have never touched, and that you are not the center of perception. You are just one of many ways life has learned to see. And somewhere in the garden, in the darkness, in the desert, other worlds are still existing, not waiting for you to understand, not needing you to see them, simply there. And perhaps they have always been there, long before you realize that you have never seen everything. Blue does not exist in the way you think. It is not something that is inherently present in the world. It is an illusion, a way your brain interprets light. When you look up at the sky and see an endless stretch of blue, you believe that is the color of the space above you, but in reality, there is no color there at all. There is only sunlight, scattered by molecules in the atmosphere, bent, separated, and ultimately interpreted by your brain as blue. If your eyes were slightly different, the sky could appear as a completely different color. And that is the first twist. What you see is not the true nature of the world, but the way the world interacts with you. But it is not only light that is misunderstood. Even the most familiar objects hide properties far beyond human intuition. A strand of spider silk, thin, light, easily carried by the wind, something you can break with a simple touch. Yet when compared to steel at the same scale, it is stronger, not just slightly, but significantly. A material created without machines, without extreme heat, without complex technology, produced by a tiny organism working in silence. And even more remarkable, it is made at room temperature, with minimal energy, no toxic waste, no noise, no environmental destruction. A production system so efficient that humans are still trying to replicate it. And there, another truth emerges. Nature does not just follow physics, it uses physics more efficiently than anything humans have ever created. But if you think that is the limit, you are still underestimating it. On a wall, a gecko stands still. No glue, no hooks, no obvious force you can perceive, yet it holds firm, moves, climbs upward, even runs across ceilings. If you tried to do the same, you would fall instantly, but for it, this is normal. Beneath its feet, millions of microscopic structures make contact with the surface, not sticking in the traditional sense, but interacting at the molecular level. The force is weak, but multiplied millions of times, it becomes strong enough to support its entire body. No glue, no large force, only an understanding of how the world works at a level the human eye cannot see. And that is the next twist. Strength does not always come from large force. Sometimes it comes from subtlety. But nature does not stop at using physics. It transforms it in ways that astonish humans. A chameleon stands within its environment. It does not change color in the simple way many people think, not just for camouflage, not just as a reflex. Beneath its skin, nanoscale structures adjust their spacing. As that spacing changes, light is reflected differently, and color changes. Not because the color is stored within the body, but because of how light interacts with that structure. A living system that manipulates light, a mechanism humans are only beginning to understand. And that is when things become clearer. Nature does not create color, it controls light. But it is not only living organisms that do this. Even things that seem still contain deep principles. A drop of water, small, simple, yet when light passes through it, it is bent, separated, and a rainbow appears. Not because color exists within the water, but because light already contains all colors, and the droplet simply reveals them. And that becomes a perfect image of how the world works. What you see is not something being created, but something being revealed. If you look back at all of this, a pattern begins to form. The world is not made of static objects, it is made of interactions. Light interacts with matter, forces interact with structure, energy interacts with the environment, and the result of those interactions is what you experience. But you do not see the entire process, you only see the outcome. And that is why everything appears simpler than it truly is. But reality is not simple, it is intricate, precise, and sometimes far beyond human imagination. And that is the final twist of this chapter. Physics is not something dry or distant from life. It is the foundation of everything you see, everything you touch, everything you feel. From the color of the sky to the strength of spider silk to the way a gecko clings to a wall, all of it is physics, but not the kind written in textbooks. It is living physics. A system tested over billions of years, optimized, refined, and functioning perfectly, without needing explanation, without needing formulas, simply existing. And when you realize that, a different feeling appears. Not complete understanding, but awe that this world is far deeper than what you have ever learned. That every small thing contains profound principles, and that you are living inside a system you have never fully seen, yet it is still there, still operating, still keeping everything going, as it always has. It is breathing. No lungs, no visible heartbeat, yet the entire planet is inhaling and exhaling in a rhythm you do not notice. Every time you take a breath, you are participating in a cycle that has existed for billions of years. Oxygen enters your body, moves into your blood, into every cell. There, it takes part in reactions that produce energy. And then you exhale. Carbon dioxide leaves your body and returns to the air. If you look at it, it seems simple. But if you look deeper, it is a loop, a cycle with no clear beginning and no end. And that is the first plot twist. You are not just living on Earth, you are exchanging with it every second. But the story does not stop with you, because when carbon dioxide leaves your body, it does not disappear. It is absorbed by plants. Green leaves standing still in the light begin a process. Sunlight provides energy. Carbon dioxide is taken in. Water is drawn from the soil. And from that, sugar is created, energy is stored, oxygen is released. A process that happens in silence, yet affects the entire planet. And then that oxygen returns to you, a closed loop. No center, no controller, yet still precise. And that is when everything begins to change the way you see the world. Because plants are not just stationary organisms, they are part of a global respiratory system. But if you think plants are the main source of oxygen, you are missing a large part of the story. Deep in the ocean, tiny drifting organisms, almost invisible, are doing most of that work. Algae, microorganisms, forms of life you do not see, do not think about, do not pay attention to, yet they produce most of the oxygen you breathe. No roots, no trunks, no leaves in the way you are familiar with, yet still performing the same function, and sometimes more efficiently. And that is the next plot twist. The things that keep you alive are not always the things you can see. But this cycle is not only between you and plants, between plants and the ocean. It is larger, broader, deeper. Carbon does not just move through the air. It moves through soil, through water, through organisms, through rocks. Some of the carbon in your body may once have been part of a tree hundreds of years ago. Before that, it may have been inside another organism. And before that, it may have existed in the ancient atmosphere. A long journey, untracked, yet never stopping. And that is when the story turns again. You do not own the atoms in your body. You are only borrowing them temporarily and then returning them. But it is not only carbon. Water is the same. Every drop of water you drink may once have been part of the ocean, part of a cloud, part of a river, part of another organism from long ago. It evaporates, rises, condenses, falls, repeats endlessly without rest. And within that cycle, there is no beginning and no end, only transformation. But what makes all of this remarkable is the scale. The Amazon rainforest, a vast region, does not just receive rain, it creates rain. Water vapor rises from leaves, accumulates in the air, forms clouds, and returns as rainfall. A self-sustaining system, a closed loop. If you look from a distance, it resembles a body, inhaling, exhaling, regulating itself. And that is the biggest plot twist of this chapter. Earth is not just a place, it is a living system. Not in the sense of consciousness, not in the sense of thought, but in the sense that it self-regulates, self-maintains, self-balances. When one part changes, other parts respond. When temperature rises, cycles shift. When one ecosystem is affected, others are impacted as well. Nothing exists independently. Everything is connected. If you remove one part from the system, you do not just affect that part, you send ripples through the whole. And that is what humans are gradually realizing, not instantly, not easily, but inevitably. Because they are not outside this system, they are inside it. They participate, they influence, and they are influenced. And then the question is no longer whether Earth is alive, but how you are living within that system. What are you exchanging? What are you taking? What are you giving back? Because every action, no matter how small, enters the cycle. It does not disappear. It does not vanish. It only transforms. And if you look slowly, you will begin to see something. Everything you do does not stop with you. It spreads, goes further, connects with things you cannot see. And perhaps that is what makes this story the most profound. You are not just an individual living on Earth. You are part of how Earth functions, part of that breath, part of that cycle. And whether you realize it or not, you are still participating right now in every breath you take. And that rhythm has never stopped. You were not born from Earth. You were born from dead stars. Before you, before Earth, before even the sun, there were massive stars burning in the universe. They formed from clouds of gas, compressed, heated, ignited, and within their cores, elements were created. Carbon, oxygen, iron, calcium, the very things you carry in your body right now. But those stars did not last forever. They collapsed, exploded, and scattered those elements into space. A death, but not an end. Rather, a dispersion, a redistribution. And from those fragments, new stars formed, new planets appeared, and eventually life began. And that is the first plot twist. You do not belong to Earth. You are a part of the universe, temporarily taking the form of a human. But the story does not stop there, because if you look deeper into your own body, you will find another trace. Within your DNA, the system that stores the information of how you are built and how you function, there are segments that do not come from you. Ancient sequences inserted over millions of years of evolution. Viruses, organisms that humans often see as intruders, as destructive forces, have left marks within you. Not all of them are harmful. Some have become part of the system. Some play roles in development, in regulation, in shaping the traits you carry. And that is the next plot twist. You are not only the product of yourself. You are the result of countless interactions, invasions, changes over time. A history written not only by lineage, but also by everything that has passed through you. But if you think evolution is only a story of the past, then you are missing the most important part. It is still happening, right now, in every cell, in every generation. Not loud, not obvious, but continuous. Every time an organism reproduces, small changes occur. some insignificant, some creating differences. And over time, those differences accumulate, giving rise to new forms of life, new abilities, new ways of existing. There is no master plan, no final goal, only trial and error, repetition, selection, and continuation. And that is where the story becomes most unexpected. Life does not aim toward a perfect version. It simply responds to the environment, adapts, and survives. Humans are not the peak of evolution, just one of many branches that have succeeded up to this point. And that can change. But what makes everything more profound is how all these elements connect. The atoms in your body once existed in the core of a star. Your DNA carries traces of ancient organisms. Your body has been shaped through millions of years of change, and your consciousness emerges from a complex system you still do not fully understand. All of it converges into a single moment, one life, one experience, and then it continues to change. And that is the biggest plot twist of this chapter. You are not an endpoint. You are a stage, a moment within a process far greater. But that does not make you small. It makes you connected to the past, to the future, to the universe. Because when you look up at the night sky, you are not just looking at distant points of light, you are looking at your own origin. And when you look within, you are not just seeing a body, you are seeing a history, a journey, a chain of events stretching across billions of years to create this moment. And perhaps that is what gives everything meaning. Not because you are the center of everything, but because you are a part of it all. A part through which the universe can become aware of itself. A part through which matter can think about itself. A part through which life can reflect on its own journey. And in that moment, everything seems to slow down. Not because time stops, but because you realize that you are here after everything that has happened, after all the changes, after all the beginnings and endings. You exist not by accident, not by a simple notion of destiny, but as the result of a long chain of possibilities that unfolded in just the right way. And perhaps the most extraordinary thing is not how vast the universe is, but that you are able to recognize it, to feel, to think, to question. And within all of that, there is one simple truth. You are not separate from the universe. You are a part of it, always have been and always will be in one form or another. It has never ended. Even when you think the story has stopped, it continues somewhere, in another form, in another rhythm you do not notice. From an organism that can reverse time, to forms of life that cannot be destroyed, from intelligence without a brain, to forests that communicate, from emotions that do not belong only to humans, to a body that is not a single one. None of these are separate fragments. They are parts of the same story, a story with no main character. And that is the final plot twist. You are not the center of this world, but you are not an observer standing outside either. You are a part of that story, a part that is unfolding right now. If you look back at everything, very slowly, you will begin to see a pattern repeating throughout. Life keeps adapting, keeps changing, keeps finding new ways to continue. When one path is blocked, it creates another. When one form is no longer suitable, it transforms. When one system collapses, another emerges. Nothing stands still. Nothing remains the same forever. And that is not a flaw. It is how this system works. But what makes this story profound is not found in distant organisms or strange phenomena. It lies in something very close, that all of these principles also apply to you. You change every day, every moment. You are not the same person you were yesterday, not only in your thoughts, but in your body, in how you feel, in how you respond to the world. And whether you realize it or not, you are still adapting to your environment, to your experiences, to yourself. There are moments when you feel like you are losing a part of yourself, an older version, an old way of thinking, a familiar feeling. But perhaps that is not loss. It is a change in form, like an organism regenerating, like an ecosystem shifting, like life has always done. And that is when everything becomes clearer. Life does not require you to stay the same. It does not expect you to be perfect. It simply continues, and so do you. You do not need to know everything. You do not need to control everything. You do not need to fully understand how this world works, because even if you do not understand, you are still a part of it. You are still participating, still influencing, still connected. Every breath you take enters a larger cycle. Every thought you have is the result of a system more complex than you imagine. Every action you make reaches further than you can see. And within all of this, there is one simple truth. You are not alone. Never. Not within your body, not in this world, not in the story of life. You are always connected with other living beings, with the environment, with the past, with the future, and even with things you cannot see. And perhaps that is what makes everything feel lighter. You do not have to carry everything on your shoulders because you are not the entire system. You are just a part, a small part, but not separate. And within that connection, there is a quietness, a sense that even as everything changes, even as the world keeps moving, there is still a continuous flow. A flow that you are part of, and that flow has never stopped. So when you lie down, when you close your eyes, when your thoughts begin to slow, remember this: you do not leave the world when you sleep. You only change the way you experience it. Life continues, outside you and within you, without needing you to observe, without needing you to control, simply unfolding. And if in this moment you feel a little more at peace, a little lighter, as if you do not need to understand everything right now, then perhaps you have touched what this story has always been leading toward. Not an answer, but a feeling. If you are still listening, still here, leave a thought of your own. It does not need to be long. It does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. And if you want to continue this journey, to go deeper into the stories this world is telling, stay, because this is not the end. It is only a pause before the story continues. If you have followed the story this far, you have likely felt something very clear. This world is not just a place to live. It is a journey to explore, to connect, and to realize that you have always been part of something much greater. If what you have just heard made you think, made you feel more at peace, or simply made you curious, take a moment to share that. Write down your thoughts, even if it is just a short sentence, because every perspective you have is also a part of this story. And if you want to continue this journey of exploring things that are strange, profound, and sometimes make you see the world in a completely different way, stay. Follow along and be part of the next stories, not to find a final answer, but to keep asking better questions.